Hey everybody, welcome to another deep dive. You ready to explore a story that's been told for centuries but still has a lot to teach us today?
Oh, absolutely. Always up for a good story.
Great. So today we're going to be talking about the parable of Lazarus and the rich man.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that one.
Yeah.
Isn't it about like wealth and poverty and stuff?
Exactly. It touches on some really big themes like what it means to live a good life, what happens after we die, and the consequences of our choices.
Heavy stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And we've got three really interesting sources to help us unpack it all.
Okay, lay it on me.
All right, so first we have this blog post that breaks down the parable into 5 practical lessons, kind of like a guide for how to live a better life based on the story.
Cool. I like practical advice. What else?
Then we have the actual biblical text itself,
Yeah.
straight from the Gospel of Luke.
Going straight to the source. I like it.
Yeah, so we can experience the story in its original form. And finally, we have this Christian website that explores the parable from a spiritual perspective.
So we're getting like a multifaceted view of the story.
Exactly. It's like looking at a diamond from different angles.
Yeah.
Each perspective reveals something new and fascinating.
I'm intrigued. Let's dive in.
All right. So the parable starts by painting this really vivid picture. The Gospel of Luke describes this rich man who's living in total luxury. He's got the finest clothes, the best food parties every night, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, like a real high roller.
Exactly. But then right outside his gate, there's this beggar named Lazarus who's covered in sores and basically starving to death.
Oh, wow. Talk about a stark contrast.
Yeah, it's really intense. And the Christian website points out that the rich man isn't just wealthy, he's completely indifferent to Lazarus' suffering. Like, he doesn't even see him.
That's pretty messed up.
Yeah, it is. Luke even mentions that dogs are licking Lazarus' sores. It's a really powerful image that shows just how desperate his situation is.
Man, that's rough. So what happens next?
Well, eventually both men die.
Okay. So I'm guessing there's a twist coming.
Oh, yeah, a big one. The story says that Lazarus is carried by angels into heaven, while the rich man ends up suffering in torment.
Whoa. Talk about a reversal of fortune.
Yeah, and that's where those 5 lessons from the blog post come in. They really help us understand what this twist means and how we can apply it to our own lives.
I'm all ears.
So lesson number 1, wealth does not equal God's favor.
Interesting. So just because someone's rich doesn't mean they're living a good life in God's eyes.
Right, and the Christian website adds to that, saying that Lazarus was probably a man of faith despite his poverty, and that his faith is what ultimately led him to be comforted in the afterlife.
So it's not about material wealth. It's about something deeper.
Right, exactly. Lesson 2 builds on that idea. It says that poverty does not equal a curse.
Okay. So you're not doomed just because you're struggling financially.
Nope. The blog emphasizes that God values a loving heart over material wealth. And that's echoed in the Christian website's point about Lazarus finding peace in heaven despite his earthly suffering.
Yeah, it's like his poverty didn't define him.
Exactly. His character and his faith were what mattered most. So we've got these 2 lessons right off the bat that challenge our assumptions about wealth and poverty.
Yeah, for sure. It's like the parable is saying, hey, don't judge a book by its cover.
Totally. And then we get to lesson number 3. Choices have consequences.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah.
We all know that deep down. But it's easy to forget sometimes.
It is, and the Christian website really drives that point home, talking about judgment and eternal consequences.
Like what we do in this life matters.
Exactly, and that leads us to lesson 4, help the less fortunate.
Okay, so this is where the rubber meets the road.
Right.
It's not enough to just think about these things. We have to actually do something.
Right, and the rich man's failure to help Lazarus really highlights the importance of this lesson. The Christian website even calls us to action, to use our resources to make a difference in the world.
Yeah, we can't just sit back and ignore the suffering around us. We have a responsibility to help.
Exactly. And finally, lesson 5. From the Christian website's perspective, accept Christ.
Okay, so this was specifically geared towards people of faith.
Yeah, it's about the urgency of salvation and the belief that there are no second chances after death.
Heavy stuff, but definitely something to think about.
So there you have it, 5 powerful lessons from the parable of Lazarus and the rich man.
Wow, that's a lot to unpack. And we're just getting started.
I know, right?
Yeah.
We've barely scratched the surface. But these lessons lay the foundation for understanding the deeper spiritual takeaways that we'll be exploring next. So buckle up. Things are about to get even more interesting.
I can't wait. You know what really gets me about this parable? It's like it's holding up a mirror.
Yeah.
to our own lives.
Oh, yeah, totally. It makes you think, am I living the right way? Am I focusing on the things that really matter?
Exactly. It challenges our priorities.
Yeah.
And sometimes,
Well, sometimes it can be kind of uncomfortable.
oh, for sure, it's poking at those parts of ourselves that we'd rather not look at too closely.
But here's the thing about discomfort. It can actually be a good thing, you know? Like, it can push us to grow, to become better versions of ourselves. That's a great point. It's like those growing pains you get as a kid. They're not fun at the time, but they're a sign that you're getting bigger and stronger.
Right. And the same goes for our spiritual and emotional growth. Sometimes
Mm.
we need a little discomfort to shake things up and help us see things from a fresh perspective.
Totally. And remember, we were talking about community earlier. That's so important for growth, too. Having people around you who support you, encourage you, and challenge you to be your best self.
Absolutely. We need each other. We're not meant to
Well,
go through life alone.
so true. So let's get back to those 5 spiritual takeaways from the Christian website. These really add another layer of depth to the parable. The first one is all about how our decisions and attitudes have lasting consequences. We touched on this before, but it's worth emphasizing.
Yeah, it's a big one. And the Christian website really connects it to the contrast between the rich man and Lazarus. The rich man was so focused on his own pleasure and comfort that he completely ignored the suffering right in front of him.
And that indifference ultimately led to his downfall.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Whereas Lazarus, even though he was suffering physically, he probably had a strong faith that sustained him. And that faith ultimately led him to be rewarded in the afterlife.
It's a powerful reminder that our actions matter, not just in this life, but maybe in the next as well.
Totally. And that brings us to takeaway number 2. Heaven and hell are real places. This is obviously a core belief for Christians,
Yeah.
and it adds a whole other dimension to the parable.
Yeah, it's like it raises the stakes. It's not just about living a good life here on earth, it's about our eternal destiny.
Right. And takeaway number 3 builds on that. Says that there's no repentance in hell.
Oh, wow. So there's no going back.
Yeah.
No second chances once you're there.
That's the belief.
Yeah.
It emphasizes the finality of death and judgment. And it's meant to be a wake-up call to encourage people to turn to God while they still have time.
Intense. Okay. What's takeaway number 4?
This one's really important.
Yeah.
Wealth and poverty don't define your spiritual state. It's not about what you have. It's about who you are.
Yeah. We saw that clearly in the parable. The rich man had everything materially, but he ended up in torment, while Lazarus, who had nothing, found peace and comfort.
Exactly. It's a reminder that true wealth isn't measured in money or possessions. It's about the state of your heart, your relationship with God, and your compassion for others.
Love that. Okay. Last but not least, takeaway number 5.
Use God's word while you can. It's a call to action, to really study and apply the teachings of the Bible to your life.
So it's not just about reading the words, it's about letting them transform you.
Right, exactly. It's about taking those teachings to heart and putting them into practice in your everyday life.
Okay, so remember how the rich man was begging Abraham to send Lazarus back to warn his brothers?
Oh, yeah. He was desperate to save them from the same fate.
But Abraham said that even if someone came back from the dead, they still wouldn't believe. It's like some people are just determined not to listen, no matter what evidence you present.
It's true. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink.
Right. Exactly. But I think the point is that we shouldn't give up on people. Even if they seem resistant to the message, we should keep sharing the truth. Keep planting seeds and hope that eventually something will take root.
Yeah, I agree. It's not our job to force anyone to believe.
Yeah.
But we can be a light in the darkness, a beacon of hope. And who knows, maybe our actions will inspire someone to open their heart and mind.
You know what I find so fascinating about this parable? It's how timeless it is. Like, it was written centuries ago, but it still speaks to us today.
Oh, absolutely. It tackles these universal themes that are relevant to everyone, no matter your background or beliefs.
Exactly. We all struggle with questions of wealth, poverty, justice, and the meaning of life. And this parable offers some profound insights into those questions.
It's like it cuts through all the noise and gets right to the heart of what truly matters.
Yeah.
Compassion, generosity, humility, and love.
And it reminds us that our choices have consequences, not just for ourselves, but for those around us and for the world as a whole.
So we have a responsibility to use our resources, our talents, and our time to make a positive difference.
Right. Exactly. This parable isn't just a story. It's a call to action.
A call to live with intention, to be mindful of our impact on the world, and to strive to make it a better place.
Love it. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a question. What will you do differently after hearing this parable?
Yeah. How will you apply these lessons to your own life? What changes will you make?
We'd love to hear your thoughts. Join the conversation in the comments below, and until next time, keep diving deep.
It's really amazing, isn't it, how this one story, this one parable, can spark so many different thoughts and feelings.
Yeah, it really gets under your skin, makes you think about things you might not have considered before.
It's like it holds up a mirror and forces you to take a good hard look at yourself.
Yeah.
Your choices, your priorities, what really matters to you.
Exactly. And sometimes what you see in that mirror might not be so pretty.
Oh yeah, for sure. It can be a little unsettling to confront those parts of ourselves that we'd rather keep hidden.
But that's where the real growth happens, right? When we face those uncomfortable truths and decide to make a change.
Absolutely. It's like those times when you have to have a difficult conversation with someone. It might be awkward or painful in the moment, but ultimately it leads to a stronger and healthier relationship.
Totally. And I think the same principle applies to our own personal growth. When we're willing to face our flaws and imperfections, we open ourselves up to the possibility of becoming better versions of ourselves.
And something else that's really important for growth, having a strong support system.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We were talking about community earlier, and I think that's so crucial. Having people around you who love you, encourage you, and challenge you to be your best self.
Totally agree. We need each other.
Yeah.
We're not meant to go through life alone.
Well said. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I just want to say how much I've enjoyed exploring this parable with you.
Me too. It's been a really thought-provoking conversation.
We've covered so much ground, from the practical lessons to the deeper spiritual takeaways.
And we've connected it all back to our own lives.
Yeah,
Which is what makes these deep dives so meaningful.
exactly. So I want to leave our listeners with one final thought. What will you do with what you've learned today?
How will you apply these insights from the parable of Lazarus and the rich man to your own life?
Will you make a conscious effort to be more compassionate, more generous, more aware of the needs of those around you?
The choice is yours. But the parable reminds us that our choices have consequences.
So choose wisely. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep striving to live a life of purpose and meaning.
And that's a wrap.